Hello and welcome to the March 20th edition of This Week in South Carolina in Session. I'm Gavin Jackson here at the State House in Columbia. Well, it was the first day back for House lawmakers after they passed the budget early last Wednesday morning, the $8.2 billion budget proposal, which now goes to the Senate Finance Committee, and it is already being hashed out in these subcommittee hearings this week. You'll see plenty of those going on this week as Senate lawmakers start taking up the budget, and we'll see Senate Finance Committee deliberations, full committee deliberations next week. But so far this week, we saw today, specifically saw the Senate Judiciary Committee take up a bill, again, S516, a bill that would look into expediting criminal convictions from courts to the State Law Enforcement Division, known as SLED, and then they would also feed that information to FBI background databases when it comes to reporting for gun purchases, because that's kind of been an issue so far, and they want to really speed up that reporting time, which can take up to 30 days in some senses. Right now they want to pass a bill that would cut that back to about 5 days. So that bill is still working through the process. A main hang-up they've been having with this bill is the increased days for background reporting, for background checks, specifically from 3 days to 5 days. When it comes down to someone trying to purchase a gun, the maximum number of days for a background check would be increased. So there's a point of contention there, but that bill is still working through the judiciary process. But we did see one joint resolution going through today that would call for a convention of states to look at passing a balanced budget amendment. Some more details on that later. And in the House today was kind of a lot of perfunctory measures going through on the House calendar, and we expect to see a pretty big solar debate tomorrow over two competing solar bills. One is backed by the utility industry, one is backed by a solar industry group, several groups actually, and we expect to see a lot of debate on that tomorrow. We did already see a press conference today with some Republicans from the House actually backing a bill by Democratic gubernatorial candidate James Smith that is a solar industry backed bill that he's been working on for several months now, compared to another bill that's being pushed through by the LCI committee chairman that has been dubbed a very rushed bill, since it's just been working its way through in less than a month right now. So going to be a lot going on, pretty heated debate on the House floor tomorrow that you might want to check out, and we'll definitely be covering for you. But speaking of heated debate, we saw Senator Tom Davis, a Beaufort Republican, today get very heated on the Senate floor when he was talking about the Jasper Ocean Terminal. That's a proposed $4.5 billion terminal, which is a joint project between the state of South Carolina, Ports Authority, and the state of Georgia right down there at the Savannah River. He accused the South Carolina Ports Authority of sabotaging this project and shifting some money, around $5 million set aside this year for permitting of that project, to be designated for the Port of Charleston and some of the expansion activities going on down there. So he really got heated on the Senate floor today, talking about that project and making some pretty big accusations that we haven't been able to get confirmation from South Carolina Ports Authority on yet. But let's listen to him right now and what he had to say. And it's about a 3-minute long clip, but he does get really heated and brings out a lot of valid points and that he backs up in his speech. Let's listen right now.
This year, the South Carolina State Ports Authority is lying down on that track, Senator Cherokee, because the $5 million that they submitted to the House to have permitting costs covered for this coming year, they've decided this year they want that money to go to Charleston. They want that $5 million on top of the $300 million we already collected and put into escrow. That's not enough. They now want the $5 million that was supposed to go to continue what that man worked for when he was up here in this chamber. And it's wrong. And here's why they're doing it. They realize it's getting too close to a reality. They realize that the permitting process is moving forward. They realize that that port site is more advantageous than either Savannah or Charleston, in that there are no height or depth restrictions in regard to this port. They realize that they have better access to I-95. They realize that there is dual rail, CSX and Norfolk Southern, that will provide service down to that port site. And so now they want to stop it. And they're going around my district and Senator Bright Matthews' district, and they're now saying, despite the fact that just a year ago they were saying 2025 for this port, they're now saying, well, it might be 2035, or it might be even longer than that. We're not sure. So we want to stop permitting on this Jasper port. We want to slow things down, take the $5 million. This is just wrong. You talk about the corridor of shame. You talk about Colleton and Hampton and Jasper and Allendale and all those counties. I'm not going to yield right now. All those counties that have poor health care, high unemployment, terrible education, you're talking about something that's going to make their lives better, create jobs for them. And yet jobs in the Charleston area are more important than jobs in those counties. Now, that particular report is not in my district, but I have worked on this for 15 years. It's becoming a reality. And naked parochial greed has now reared its head. That can't happen in this chamber. We can't undo all the progress that has been made. This General Assembly has spoken on 2 separate occasions and 2 separate legislative enactments that directs, tells, orders the State Ports Authority to expeditiously develop that port. And in abrogation of that legislative directive, they have taken these actions. Not only have they disregarded what this General Assembly said should be done, they have, in my judgment, put themselves in breach of a joint venture agreement between the 2 state ports authorities that say that each will appropriate the money necessary to pay for that permits. They decided they don't want to do that any longer.
And the Senate Judiciary Committee, like we said, narrowly passed out a joint resolution, which is the Senate joint resolution, that would call for a constitutional convention of states. Now, so far, 28 states have called for this constitutional convention. There needs to be about 34 states to pass resolutions calling for that. That's about 2/3. And now, if they were actually to pass a balanced budget amendment in this constitutional convention that Congress would therefore call, 34 states would have to ratify such an amendment. So a very, very long process to even get to a constitutional convention, let alone passing something that would amend the U.S. Constitution. And again, that would be an amendment to make a balanced budget amendment for lawmakers in Congress to pass a balanced budget. However, several lawmakers today brought up the point that it's already difficult enough for them to pass a budget in its own sense, let alone one that's balanced, because we all know that there is plenty of deficit spending going on up in D.C., and the national deficit, the national debt rather, is already over $21 trillion. Now, some Democrats did express concern, that's why we saw such a narrow vote today, about what would happen should there be a constitutional convention, because they have worries that any number of things could be changed in the Constitution and passed by 3/4 of the states. But again, still a long way away from that, but here's some commentary from the Senate Judiciary Committee today about that joint resolution.
Some other states have put in requirements that you can't talk about anything other than this and impose penalties if you do things other than the balanced budget amendment. There are probably some differences of opinion on what could happen once you get there. Personally, I think you could probably talk about other stuff, but you could limit your delegates, and I think other states have already started doing this, and other states would. You can impose penalties on your delegates for going beyond that limited scope. And I think that's what we would do in South Carolina.
And also in the Senate Judiciary Committee today, we saw several bills moving, several other bills moving, but we did not see that one, S516, that would expedite reporting again of criminal convictions of certain violent crimes to the State Law Enforcement Division. Now, this information would therefore be transferred to the FBI background check database and used when people are trying to buy guns. And, you know, it's pretty obvious, pretty fairly simple process when it comes to these background checks. For the most part, for people who try to buy guns, you know, roughly 90% of the time, 93% of the time, some cases, these are instantly done. People are instantly verified and are able to purchase their firearm. However, in several other cases, there sometimes are red flags raised, and then the FBI takes their time, up to 3 days in South Carolina, to verify the situation and see if they can remedy the situation. Now, if that situation isn't remedied, if they don't know what the red flag was for, and they can't find out within 3 days, and that person can go ahead and purchase that gun at the discretion of the gun seller. Now, this bill, S516 rather, would actually increase the number of days from 3 days to 5 days, which is a pretty big point of contention, and would also limit the number of days that the courts could take to report such convictions to SLED. So 2 different moving parts in this bill. One, like I said, expedites reporting from the courts of when someone maybe gets convicted of a certain domestic violence charge and would not be able to get a gun, versus another provision of this bill that would also increase the number of days for background checks, which has become the more contentious point of this bill. I don't know where it might be going at this point, but we still want to see some amendments. We have to wait for some amendments on this bill. That's why we didn't see it move today. but there's even talk of even the background check portion of this bill being stripped out of the bill. Even though it's only a 2-year provision, we should note that it's a pretty temporary provision, and it's meant to give these counties and SLED some time to kind of catch up and make sure that all the reporting is going through when it comes to the reporting from the courts that is then fed to SLED and the FBI. So we have some comments from the Senate Judiciary Committee today, so let's take a listen to this right now.
They simply don't have enough staffing to fully evaluate the 7%, and I know it's not 7% totally that we're talking about requiring additional information, but let's assume it's 7%. They don't have enough case workers to handle the volume.
The FBI.
The FBI. So the additional days would give them additional time to handle the large volume coming out of South Carolina.
And like I said, the South Carolina House of Representatives went long today. It was their first day back since last Wednesday after they passed the budget at 12:15 in the morning. So they were off last week, and they're trying to work their way through their burgeoning calendar, which is only growing, and they'll be back on it tomorrow. But they did take up some bills, and we do expect them to have that solar debate tomorrow. But we did see, since they did go so long today, they pushed back some of their afternoon meetings, including their regularly held Judiciary Committee meeting, and they were set to take up, and they did take up right now. They are talking about this bill that would look at enforcing a sanctuary city requirement where municipalities across the state of South Carolina would have to verify that they are not sanctuary cities. And this is a bill backed by Governor Henry McMaster to kind of crack down on the potential illegal immigration right now. We don't have any sanctuary cities in South Carolina, but he wants to make sure that they don't creep in, or that any cities in the state stop enforcing federal immigration law, as we've seen in several other states across the country. Now, it's not been a problem in South Carolina, like we said, but we did hear from the governor at a press conference a few days ago talking about this bill that is still, like I said, working its way through the House Judiciary Committee. So let's hear what the governor had to say a couple days ago about this.
This bill provides that a verification for each municipality that must be made every year to certify that they are complying with the law. And it will be, the certification will be conducted by the State Law Enforcement Division. And it's just one more way for South Carolina to say that we stand by the law in South Carolina. We'll protect our people in South Carolina. The safety of the people is paramount in South Carolina, and we want everyone around the country to know that in South Carolina the law is enforced, and that we will not have sanctuary cities in South Carolina.
And like I said, be sure to catch my video recap tomorrow of all the House action and the Senate action, as we always do, but specifically the House, where we're expected to see debate over 2 solar bills being talked about on the House floor. One is backed by LCI Committee Representative Bill Sandifer. He's the chairman of that committee, and he is pushing back through a bill that would essentially I don't want to get into the specifics of this bill. So be sure to tune in tomorrow as well. We're going to be talking about the solar bills that are going to be debated, expected to be debated on the House floor tomorrow. There are 2 different ones going through. There's kind of a movement we saw today, a press conference for one of the bills that is backed by the solar industry, which they say would raise a cap on net metering, which is the amount of energy, solar energy produced by rooftop panels, that they say the cap is soon to be reached. And if we do not expand that cap, we don't raise that cap, that the 3,000 job industry, the solar industry in South Carolina, would be threatened and would stall perhaps. So they want to see this bill move through, and it's been a bill that's been filed last year. It's been somewhat heavily vetted and has broad bipartisan support, and is sponsored by Democratic gubernatorial candidate James Smith. So we did see a press conference today with some Republican House lawmakers and an outside group talking about these 2 bills, and just kind of gearing up for the debate tomorrow about these 2 solar bills. So here's some more details about them right now.
That's H 4421 that will give homeowners the ability to make their own choices insofar as what they do with energy, in particular solar energy. You know, we also have a competing bill, that's H 5045. I want everyone to understand that this is a bill that is much like the Base Load Review Act of 2007. It has been rushed into the House of Representatives. It is written by the utility lobbyists, supported by the Chamber of Commerce, supported by the Manufacturers Alliance, and even Grover Nordquist has written a letter today about it. I think this is going to define South Carolina for the future. Do we want to cave in to the utilities and their lobbyists, or do we want to give our citizens a chance? I think we're going to have a great spirited debate this week, and I look forward to advocating for it.
You know, it's all right to have differing and competing ideas. What is not right is when we have competing interests, and that's exactly what we have with two bills that are on the House calendar. You heard earlier about House Bill 4421. That is a bill that was filed last November. We have had open forums, we have had feedback, we've had input, and we've had compromise from various individuals, organizations, and all parties involved. Most importantly, we have heard from ratepayers. Ratepayers who are sick and tired of the monopolies that we have in South Carolina. They are sick and tired of being told this is how you're going to do it, this is how it's always been, and this is the status quo. Well, lo and behold, earlier this month, House Bill 5045 was filed. I can think of no other term than arrogance when I saw this bill filed on March 1st, and only 5 days later, that bill filed by a powerful House chairman had already passed his subcommittee and his full committee and is now up for full debate.
So lots to watch for tomorrow, as always, up here at the State House every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday when we're up here covering what's going on. And so that's why we want you to stay with SCE TV throughout the legislative session, because even though we're getting close to May 10th, which is the last day of session, we still have plenty to cover and things only get faster from here on out. So be sure to watch my daily video recaps every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, live at 7 p.m. on Facebook, SCE TV's Facebook page, SCE TV's YouTube page, and my Twitter account at Gavin Jackson. Now, those are always there, those are always online, and you can also see them in the South Carolina State House Daybook, which I publish every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday on scetv.org. And that gives you all the schedules, the agendas, and all the State House news that you can read right there in one place in one organized location to find out what's going on up here at the State House, because we know it's pretty difficult to navigate all the ins and outs, especially with all the meetings going on now up here at the State House. So check that out. We have plenty of resources online at scetv.org just for you. I'm Gavin Jackson here at the State House for SCE TV.